Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Graying Jedi podcast. I am Urza Master. Joining me as always, Lord Uther and Jedi Master Psyllium Maas. Today we're changing pace a bit after gallivanting around the galaxy with a team of ragtag youngsters and a maybe nice, maybe not nice pirate captain. We return to the Skywalker storyline with Episode 3 of the Star Wars saga, Revenge of the Sith, which I'm sure we all remember as it's been seared into our memory, burnt in with fire, hardened by lava, if you will. But, gentlemen, I think it goes without saying that this was an interesting film, to say the least, in its time, and continues to have a somewhat questionable place in the timeline and in the judgment of Star Wars fans. Psyllium Maas, what can you tell us about Revenge of the Sith? Why is this such a controversial entry?
Thank you, fellow Jedi Masters. Thank you, Graying Jedi fans, as we conclude the prequel trilogy of Star Wars. It's 20 years old this year. Happy birthday. After it premiered at the Cannes Film Festival on May 15th, 2005, Revenge of the Sith, Star Wars, Episode 3, Revenge of the Sith, unspooled in U.S. theaters on May 19th, 2005. It was the second, almost said first there, it was the second film I saw 3 times in a day. Episode 3, 3 times a day. Me and my long-suffering significant other had an IHOP breakfast. I think I had strawberry pancakes. Went over to the best theater in Hollywood, the ArcLight Cinemas, which included the famous Cinerama Dome, and still does, but ArcLight has shuttered since the pandemic. We're hoping for a resurrection in the future. But we saw Revenge of the Sith in the morning. Then we went out and looked at some homes because we were in the process of getting ready to leave Hollywood and head up north into the high desert. So we looked at a few homes, came back and caught a late afternoon show, just as thrilling the second time. Met a friend for dinner and then caught a later third show that same evening. And so I was all Sithed out. It kicked the Sith out of me by the time May 19th was over. And it was quite an experience. This was the last fully autonomous 20th Century Fox Star Wars release. Ever since 1977, that had been the domain of 20th Century Fox. It would be another 7 years from 2012 when George Lucas decided to sell his company and the intellectual property rights to the Star Wars saga, to Willow, to the Indiana Jones films, sold them all to the Walt Disney company and made a cool $3 or $4 billion. I forget how many billions it was, but it was either 3 or 4. And then suddenly it was a Disney property. It would be 10 years from the release before the first Disney branded Star Wars content would appear. And that was when J.J. Abrams woke up the Force with The Force Awakens in 2015. But you have to remember, Jedi Master Urza Master refers to it. We didn't know any of this at the time. We didn't even have Dave Filoni around yet. He would start his animated series in conjunction with George Lucas, The Clone Wars, which originally aired inexplicably on TNT. That wouldn't come until 2008. So at the time, if you remember, 20 years ago, we were looking at potentially the last Star Wars content, at least that we were aware of, that was being developed. Like this was it. We had a closed circuit from episode 4, 5, and 6, the original trilogy, circling back around to episodes 1, 2, and now 3. So there was a fair chance, a better than punching chance, that this could have been the last Star Wars content that we were gifted with. No such thing as streaming, no such thing as Disney Plus, no such thing as the sequel trilogy, and etc. Again, not even the Star Wars animated was really out there in the multiverse. So we were looking down the gun barrel at, well, is this it? Is this all there is? And so you have to keep that sort of in the context. I think our fellow council members will agree, though, in those 20 years to where we are right this very moment, the Star Wars universe has expanded in such a way that it's actually deepened your appreciation or understanding of this film. If there were things about this film that seemed a little edgy, a little controversial, perhaps, some of the post Sith work has sort of tried to explain it and deepen it and make it fit more in a context. So
Justify it.
Justify it even. Yep, there you go. I mean, whatever terminology you're comfortable with, whatever point of view you share, the end result is that, again, like an evolving life form, the saga moves on and deepens and grows and so on and so forth. I think Hayden Christensen, we've agreed, starting as a bratty Padawan and evolving to where we've seen him now. I think in large part that journey starts with this film, but also expands. So now when you go back and watch it, knowing our newfound appreciation for what he was able to accomplish as Anakin, I think that should be noted. I think our appreciation of Ewan McGregor as Obi-Wan Kenobi is only deepened with this and the follow-up series, the series that we covered right here on the Warp Core, Obi-Wan Kenobi. I mean, it's a direct sequel, obviously, to the events of this film. I mean, even more so than some of the other Disney streaming shows we've had, the Book of Boba Fett, The Mandalorian, The Acolyte, Skeleton Crew. Obi-Wan Kenobi is literally as if they had none of those other shows mattered, and this was the follow-up. All of the setup and situations from that series are embedded in the prequel trilogy and in this film specifically. So,
and that can't be said enough.
Right.
Without episode 3, we don't have any of the new Star Wars.
Right. Absolutely. So, I mean, and George Lucas, I mean, ride or die with him. He was the writer-director on this. There was no shared co-screenplay credit as there was on episode 2, Attack of the Clones with Jonathan Hale, which we've also covered here on the Warp Core. Please go check our Graying Jedi archives. Rick McCallum.
Like and subscribe.
And subscribe. Rick McCallum was the producer, as he had been for the other two. And a shout out to John Williams, who yesterday, on February 8th, turned 93 years old. Happy birthday, John Williams. He was 25 years younger when he did Revenge of the Sith, but he has not lost a beat. The maestro lives, and we celebrate all of his contributions to cinema and Star Wars and Indiana Jones and Harry Potter and Jaws and all of them. 93. Way to go, John. So, gentlemen, I would love your illuminating reminiscing about episode 3 and what it meant for you. I will share some of my opinions on the ride around on the way back. But what was see if you can separate your initial reaction to it 20 years ago versus perhaps after 20 years. Have you had a reappraisal? Or are there things you like even more about it? Or are there things that you like even less about it? What say you?
This is a great challenge right here. Being the youngster who saw this at the time, this is one of the few movies I actually went to in the theater when I was a kid. So didn't Didn't get to the theater very often. Usually I was a big blockbuster kid, premiere video, family video, for our local rental places. Even some of the gas stations rented movies. Still do in some of those rural parts of northern Wisconsin. Shout out to y'all. Um, I was really looking forward to this because of episode two. I did not particularly care for episode two, for Hayden Christensen, and was not met with fond memories when I watched this. I loved Obi-Wan. In all three of the prequel movies, I thought Obi-Wan, Ewan McGregor's performance was phenomenal. I liked Christopher Lee. I liked Ian McDermott. Natalie Portman, of course, huge crush on Natalie Portman. Big Queen Amidala fan. Um, and I didn't mind what they did with Yoda. It was kind of nice seeing a different side of Yoda. Uh, I the three parts of a part three movie, I have to say, part one, good. Part two, eh. Part three, yes, I really liked the end, minus the dialogue of the fight sequence. The sort of middle part where you get to Order 66, the whole General Grievous thing. I know the hello there is super, vogue, but I didn't care at that point. The story for me was never about the separatists and the robot armies and, switching over to the Empire. Obviously, that vehicle had to be put forth in this movie. Um, but that part I didn't really care about. I like you kind of knew it was going to be coming in some way, shape, or form. It was shocking, Order 66, but I didn't care. Like I still to this day, like I know that has affected much of the Star Wars canon since then. I still don't really care. That part of the movie lacks a lot of luster for me, but the whole turn to the dark side in the first act, discovering Amidala was going to die in childbirth, we kind of knew that was coming. It was very predictable, but it's hard to get beyond that, and that's okay. I could have accepted that. The dialogue was what really got me. It just lacked, I don't know, panache. I guess, it's hard to say exactly what was missing. It just felt very unconvincing the whole time. And I know part of that has been put on Hayden Christensen's shoulders. I will say, 20 years later perspective, it kind of makes sense. He was conflicted, confused. He was in this transformation. And it's pretty hard when you're going through something like that in life, in real life, to put into words anything that matters to you. It always comes out kind of awkward. And now I'm a little more accepting. I still don't love it, but I'm a little more accepting. But the fight sequence at the end was phenomenal. Really, really good. I still don't care for the dialogue. The Sith are evil. Well, from my point of view, the Jedi are evil. Oh, well, agree to disagree. Let's be friends. Stupid. I still hate it. Um, but everything else about that has sort of shined a little more because of what they did in Kenobi. That series redeemed this movie in a very big way. At the time, it was okay. Like, it was exciting. As a kid, I enjoyed it. I wasn't a film critic by any stretch. I'm still not. I'm not Roger Ebert, even to this day. I'm just a fan. I'm just a movie guy. I own a lot of movies, but I'm not going to pretend I'm some expert. I don't have 37 years of experience. I don't have this or that. I don't have some high powered rig that helps me dissect every video. But I watched it, and I'm entitled to an opinion. I will say my opinion has grown in favor of this film ever since then. But as a kid, it was entertaining. The merchandising was great. I see why it was successful. Um, I look back on the hate I had for Hayden Christensen, and it was totally unearned. So I'm going to take this moment in particular to issue a very formal Urza Master apology to Hayden Christensen. I maligned you for years, and I apologize because what you did in Kenobi completely redeems what you did in this film. And now I see the pieces that I should have seen before. And that's all I have to say about that.
Yes. But with that being said, can we just take a moment and realize the national treasures that we have with John Williams and Angelo Badalamenti and Danny Elfman? Are there any better? I can't think of any better off the top of my head. I'm sure Psyllium Maas can probably name several, or maybe one or two. But speaking to the point of that too, someone who really got me interested in listening to musical scores was Psyllium Maas. Many a time, just hanging out, listening to music, these musical scores, talking movies over his house, got me to truly appreciate that. So to hear John Williams take this score and just it paints a picture in every single Star Wars movie. It just does. I mean, it fits in perfectly, and I think we see it here. Let's start with what could have been better. I'm not going to say bad. I'm going to say what could have been better. The I'm dying of a broken heart. I'm going to go somewhere with this, by the way. I struggle with that. That's a rough one. You're right. The dialogue towards the end, very flat as well. And it's not even the delivery. I think it's how it's written. And so let's go to that point. Psyllium Maas, correct me if I'm wrong, but Lucas wrote this one with probably very little rewrites from anybody else? Question mark.
Well, there were a couple of uncredited rewrites at one point, because he had performed a similar service for Steven Spielberg on Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. Legendary English playwright Tom Stoppard, famous author of Rosencrantz and Guildenstern Are Dead, he did a polish, and I believe Carrie Fisher, who was by this point a well-established Hollywood script doctor, had also sort of taken turns with it. But again, yes, primarily this was. Now, there's one wrinkle that should be mentioned here, and I will also interject very briefly that of the three members of the council, I seem to be the only one that had zero problems with the dialogue and all of those things. But that's fine. I'm happy to be in the minority. Most of the quote rewriting was actually done either simultaneously or after a cut of the film had been edited. And so then they said, well, we got to do new scenes here, or we need an extra beat there. So it was not a traditional, here's the script, needs another pass. They wrote it. They said, oh,
Right.
that's it. Let's go film it. So there, in some cases, the film came out in May of 2005. They were doing pickups or repasses or reshootings like in March. Like 2 months before the film was supposed to open, they were still tinkering with it to just get it right. And sometimes some of that last minute tinkering can produce less than stellar results depending on your point of view. But that's this film was it was constructed more like a good automobile. Put the spark plug in here and change the oil there and do all this. Rather than a more traditional approach, which is the writer writes, gets it to where the studio says, all right, we'll spend the money, and then they go off and shoot that script. This one was always kind of a work in progress in terms of finalizing what they wanted to do.
So I think here's what I'm telling you what I think, but Lucas, the overall story, the umbrella of the story, I think he's very good at that, right? And I think what he struggles in at times is writing dialogue. So let's look at Empire Strikes Back, because if I'm correct, he didn't write that, but he had the story in place. Is that
exactly
correct?
Lawrence Kasdan, who also wrote Raiders of the Lost Ark and Return of the Jedi and Silverado and The Force, he co-wrote Force Awakens. Yes, Lawrence Kasdan is largely credited with making Empire pop.
So I'm not pooping on George, which would be weird overall. What
Yes.
I'm getting at is sometimes you have to take a step back. I'm going to give you a quick analogy. There's great coaches everywhere. There are coaches who are great at practice, like they are legitimately excellent practice coaches. And when it gets to the game, they struggle managing it, right? And I think that's kind of what we see here, right? Like he's got this overall idea, but when he hands it off to the writers, we get a better version of it. And again, with Empire, I think that's very evident. Now, with that being said, I think we've all said this about Hayden Christensen. I actually think he played the role very well. I think we got the brattiness. He was trying to bring that forth. I just don't think he was given a lot to work with. And then to everyone's point here, like we said before, when we've seen him and everything since then, he's been absolutely amazing. He's fallen back in love with the role, rightfully so. Yes, fight scenes are amazing. I see a lot of those arguments out there about how the fight scenes in the first three make A New Hope just look awful in terms of at least the lightsaber duel that we had there, but we understand why. Last point, and I've said this many times, I really think episode 2 should have been the first episode. Episode 3 should have been episode 2, and then our third movie should have been Vader hunting down any remaining Jedi, which has kind of been my problem moving forward again, is that all these Jedi, there's still some Jedi that made it, and I thought we kind of had the canon established that Obi-Wan was kind of that last Jedi. Oh, I can't even believe I said the title of that movie. But, so I could see it maybe 1 or 2 or 3. I don't know, but it just seems like every time we turn over a stone, there's another one that made it. And I struggle with that a little bit, though I know what they're getting at. And yes, I think when we've seen it in the TV series where they're mentioning things that have happened in these first 3, I think those writers saw the potential with those ideas in the first 3, and they've tried to take some of that and spin it their own way. And yes, I think they've tried to course correct some of that stuff too, understandably so, because you really can't just tank those 3. Which has been the comment about redoing the last 3, or at least the last 2 sequels, and somehow just saying it was all a bad dream. Which I don't think they're ever going to be able to do that, because those 2 are nightmares. But with that being said,
No.
I really liked Revenge of the Sith. I think it got the job done, except for those couple of things. Ewan McGregor, I mean, another national treasure, taking the whole vibe of Alec Guinness and being able to play that forward while still being himself is incredible acting, makes you want more, and he wants to do more. And I hope they really give him that chance. I really like this one. For me, I think everyone already knows where I'm going to go with my lightsaber rating. But I loved it. I liked it. I liked it a lot. I didn't love it. Those are 2 different things. I liked it a lot.
Excellent. I should note that this was the first Star Wars where Anakin and the fully armored Darth Vader were played by the same person. In the original trilogy, of course, we had British bodybuilder and Clockwork Orange actor Dave Prowse in the suit, but we had James Earl Jones's menacing baritone as the voice, and we still do. James Earl Jones did record the Vader lines here at the end, but that was Hayden Christensen tearing himself free, a la Frankenstein, there at the end of it. Gentlemen, I can tell you still, 20 years later, which shows you how much of an impact this film had at the time, I can tell you exactly what I felt when I walked out of the first of 3 screenings that day. I thought the first 45 minutes with the epic, basically what we learned was the final battle of the Clone Wars in the skies above Coruscant. I thought that leading into the machinations of the Jedi Council wanting Anakin to spy on Palpatine, Palpatine making his sales pitch to Anakin about Darth Plagueis. All of those things, the General Grievous subplot, he's now the new one and done villain, and George loves to do that with Jango Fett and Darth Maul and so forth. Introduce a villain and then we'll kill him. I thought that what we were getting was a grade A corker of a Star Wars film, etc. Right around Order 66, I thought, man, we just found another level. We found another gear, because now the horrific darkness of the dark side of Mace Windu and Kit Fisto confronting Palpatine, of the Jedi Ki-Adi-Mundi and everyone being wiped out across the galaxy, the attempted assassination of Yoda on Kashyyyk, our first glimpse of Kashyyyk since the Star Wars Holiday Special of 1978. Folks, you're going to want to try and find that one online. That's a corker. All of this, culminating with an absolutely fantastic, let's trash the Senate chamber between Palpatine and Yoda, like, mind-blowing, mind turning into, goo. And the duel on Mustafar between Obi-Wan and Anakin. Now, I alluded to it briefly. I won't belabor the point. I think my fellow council members have raised legitimate and worthwhile notations of it. Because those lines were being delivered primarily by Ewan McGregor, I failed you, Anakin. I failed you. And it's over, Anakin. I have the high ground. I was caught wrapped up in the ferocity of the conflict in that moment. And so he sold them to me. Perhaps just seeing them lying there on the written page or the keyboard, maybe they do have exactly those things that Lord Uther suggested, a little flat, perhaps. But for this viewer, there was just, like I say, a committed performance from both during that to me, like I would never be able to separate the craft from the overall ambience and tone. And so for me, I had zero problems with it, but I can respectfully acknowledge that if you don't have that same level of focus in that particular moment as I had, then it might have hit you in a completely different way. And I think that's what we have with all the prequels, whether it's Phantom Menace, Attack of the Clones. I think there were enough jagged breaks with what we were, either our expectations or what we were accustomed to in the original trilogy, that I think it took people a while to kind of come to terms with what their feelings overall were. I think all three films were terrific. I think people generally out there acknowledge that maybe Attack of the Clones was sort of the weak link in the trilogy, perhaps. Depends on how much you hated Jar Jar in the first one. But I don't think anyone says, oh, Revenge of the Sith, they really blew that landing. I mean, that final moment of Obi-Wan on Tatooine with the twin sons and Owen and Beru and so forth, you literally just want to, pop out the VHS of Sith, and they still had them back then, and throw in New Hope and just get right to work. I mean, obviously later we'd get Rogue One, but that's how seamless that it felt. Dying of a broken heart, yes. I think it probably plays better as a metaphor than an actual physical ailment. So, but I like the hopelessly romantic gesture, right? I mean, it is sentimental and corny, perhaps, and over that. But that leads me, gentlemen, to my overarching point. This was a very operatic Star Wars, okay? Like, they literally had a sequence in an opera house. Everything was bigger. Everything, in the fight sequence in the end, the dialogue is shouted to be overheard from molten lava. Mustafar, that was the first time ILM, in my opinion, had successfully shown us molten lava. They had failed that test 10 years earlier in 1995 when they did the adaptation of Michael Crichton's Congo. And if you go back and watch Congo, 30 years old this year, I mean, at the time, what was considered state-of-the-art special effects, the lava, it still looks ludicrous. They had not created the software and the technology to really make that work. They pushed the boundaries as close as they could, but it came up short to my eyes in a theater in 1995. It took them 10 years to finally get lava. Even Dante's Peak and Volcano, we had dueling volcano pictures in 1997. They still were sort of stumbling along to make it look less computer generated and more like, go with the flow. And Mustafar finally was this culminating experience. And yes, I buy it. I understand that I'm not looking at a angry lava planet in space, but they made me believe it. So kudos to them there. But everything was operatic. Everything. The first sequence in the picture is like 35 minutes. How many action sequences have we seen in a Marvel film, in Indiana Jones or wherever, where they're 35 minutes long? I mean, don't forget, we have to execute Dooku. We have to save Palpatine. We have the ship battles in the skies above Coruscant. We have a duel with General Grievous. I mean, there's so darn much in just the first four. And then they're like, now the movie starts, right? Padme is pregnant. And it doesn't look like it's going to end well. And what do we do? So like I said, love it, like it, think that it could have been better. However you fall, Graying Jedi fans, it was big. It was larger than life. It was a primal scream of Star Wars. And again, can't emphasize this enough, it could very well have been the last time we spent in a galaxy far, far away. And we are fortunate that 20 years later, that universe, through comic books, through novelizations, original novels, the streaming shows, the movie sequels, can't wait to talk about those with this crew. It's all just created an even bigger mosaic and a larger quilt in which to stitch. And they're not done yet. Thank the maker. So,
well, I just watched those Congo lava scenes, and not that bad for 1995.
Okay, fine. I think maybe, yeah. The rest of that.
I remember them being pretty bad.
Yeah. And again, little irony, Frank Marshall, who is Kathleen Kennedy's husband and who had worked on many Steven Spielberg productions, like this was one of his, I think it was actually his third film, because he did a live about the Andean plane crash where the soccer players ate each other to stay alive. He originally gave us Arachnophobia, which was a fantastic spiders on the loose picture, unless you don't like spiders. Like, he was an experienced director and so forth, and I just hated Congo. That's another podcast entirely, so maybe I was there. But yeah, the lava sequences for me fell short. Didn't burn, but I thought Mustafar, like, I don't know. I think I've asked you gentlemen this offline. Would you rather live on Hoth with stinky tauntauns, or would you rather have a castle on Mustafar? And I think if I remember correctly, both of you, or at least alluded to, you'd rather turn the heat on than freeze to death. And I think I agree with you. I think Mustafar, just get a moist towel and just wipe off your brow occasionally. I think it would be a really cool place to just kind of sit there and plot the demise of the universe.
Perhaps. So, gentlemen, that brings us to our Kyber Crystal ratings for Revenge of the Sith. And suffice to say, I think our Kyber Crystals may have changed somewhat over time. But, Psyllium, since yours is maybe more obvious, why don't you kick us off?
Wear my Kyber Crystals on my sleeve. We're going with a Philadelphia Eagles green today, as it is Super Bowl Sunday. I have no love for the Philadelphia Eagles. Fans of cut the cheese, poke the bear, roast the Niner know where my NFL allegiances lie. But today we're going NFC strong, and that's how I feel. That's how I feel about Star Wars content, guys. I mean, you can call me Pollyanna or whatever, and that's fine. I have always taken great comfort and solace and sheer joy of new Star Wars content, because I realize how precious it can be. and how the fickle fates of fandom or the economics of the time could dictate that we will not have new adventures and new characters and timelines and so forth. So whether it's the Acolyte or Skeleton Crew or Book of Boba Fett or The Force Awakens or The Rise of Skywalker, like I'm just so glad that there are new chapters, new stories to tell, and you're just not going to find me able to slip on that critical hat as tightly as I might some other things that we cover here in the pending rebrand universe. I admit it. I am in the bag for Star Wars, and it will take a lot for me to turn my back on something that has given me so much enjoyment over 40 plus years. Going on 50 pretty soon. So yes, it's a deep green kyber crystal for Revenge of the Sith, Episode 3.
Well, if we were watching Phantom Menace, which we already had, I would just be wearing mine as well if it was for Phantom Menace. But seeing as it's not, I will use something I have used before, and I'll go with Yoda's eventual child that we'll see later on. I'm guessing it's Yoda's and Yaddle's, which should have made this guy be called Paddle, but that's a whole nother story. Or maybe, well, yeah, that sounds good. So green for me sets up A New Hope, or at least, what we're going to wind up seeing a little bit later on very well. So yeah, green.
And I will jump on that and say that my kyber crystal has changed over the years from a blue to a Donkey Kong Country green. Not the greenest green, but still an effective green. I was more blue back in the day, but I agree with Psyllium Maas. This could have been the last Star Wars anything in my lifetime. I would have been okay with that, but I would have felt deeply unsatisfied. And thank goodness for Kenobi, because it redeemed everything and brought it back to what we here in the Graying Jedi Council chambers always strive to achieve, which is a green kyber crystal for Luke Skywalker. And until we see you again in that galaxy far, far away, we say to you, as we always do, may the Force be with you. Always.